told me this was 3 hours.
It's recording now.
We are recording now. We're good to go.
Yeah.
And I'll try and keep it under the 3 hour window. I keep using that joke. No, but seriously, thanks everybody for joining. We definitely want this to be two-way. Chime in, please, please, please. So the purpose of this is just a raw introduction. This is a preview to the 101 class. I am not a network engineer. I do not understand the raw protocols of audio over Ethernet, but we're going to dive into it a little bit and really look at the three different segments that I see in that and focus more on the performance and the Dante side of it. So we're going to go through pretty quick. Thank you again for joining. I want to respect your time, obviously this morning, bright and early out on the West Coast. So audio over Ethernet, what and why? So the big thing here is IP audio. It's very simply the concept of moving digital audio over the network via IP from point to point. Very simple. It's been around for a number of years now. This is nothing new. But coming into our space, we're starting to see a lot more adoption of key technologies, and we'll get into that. The big why, in my opinion, is flexibility and scalability, because using a network as a backbone allows us to do things that we didn't necessarily think or know that were possible before. And it also makes our lives a lot easier from a system design and system integration standpoint. The important thing to know is, I find the biggest challenge is navigating that not all solutions are created equal and they're not all the same thing. So what do you mean by that? Well, there's all these languages of AOE, and it gets very confusing because when you really dive into it, there's a ton of languages and stuff that we've never really thought about or know about, like AES 47, AES 50, obviously AVB. So there's a bunch of different languages. The key is, how do we navigate that? What do we use and what do we sell? So everything is built around IP. Obviously, that's very important to know. There's things like STP, spanning tree protocol, that's used with Sonos. So that's obviously more of our consumer level product. AVB is getting very popular now in our residential space, thanks to Savant. AES 67 is a pretty open standard from the Audio Engineering Society. And then we have Dante, we'll talk about what that is quite a bit more, but there are other standards, but that's the bulk of what you need to kind of think about. So does any of this really matter? It does, because you need to think about what you're going to deploy and what we're going to integrate and sell and make sure that it's reliable. And then also what level of performance we're trying to achieve in a home or even a commercial property. So the way I look at it is we really have three buckets. We have our consumer-led product, we have our flexible product, i.e. control systems, and then we have our performance-led product, which will be things like Roon and Dante. And I'm going to focus on those two today and talk a bit more on those. So our consumer products, we know what they are, we love them. Obviously, the big Sonos, right? That's the big one. Very successful IP-based audio product. And where they've won is they've made the product and the software and made it work on standard protocols very reliably. Obviously, they're designed for smaller deployments, not larger homes, but you can get quite big with it these days. Closed loop systems, generally speaking, they're lower quality, right? But they choose lower quality at the basically for reliability, right? So Sonos runs, if you want to get geeky, at 16-bit 44K sampling rates. And so that means smaller data, which means more reliable on a network, easier on Wi-Fi. That's a big one, because a lot of these consumer-led products are driven around plug it in the wall, have a wireless speaker on a tabletop. So that's a big win. Downside, restrictive, right, from a control standpoint. Although we've seen, and personally seen, quite a bit of success with Sonos in the past year as they have introduced their new Works with Sonos API. So that means manufacturers can talk natively to Sonos behind the scenes on the network and have the Sonos app actually control their product. So Integra does this, and Meridian does this actually. So that's where I've seen the success, being the Meridian distributor in the US, in the fact that a Sonos port can natively control a Meridian product. So we can get the scalability, flexibility, reliability of Sonos with the performance improvement and quality level of Meridian. And the consumer still uses the Sonos interface. It's absolutely brilliant. So that's been good. But obviously, these products are designed primarily around the consumer, and Sonos, Bluesound, Hios are the examples. So when it comes to flexibility in our industry, to me, I think about a control system. Obviously, they are now adapting IP audio. I'm not a Savant expert, but we do a lot of Savant projects with my dealers and integrators, and AVB has been very successful for them. The interesting thing about AVB and its protocol or language, if you will, is that it kind of keeps you in that sandbox. So you have to use their products to make sure that everything works. But that's great because it gives you that flexibility, reliability, scalability if you work in their sandbox. You get DSP control. What is DSP? That means improving or adjusting the sound quality for a greater outcome on the backside. So maybe you have challenging speaker placement, or you just want to change the fidelity of a product with software, you can do that here. So it's an interesting bucket here in the middle, and it's something that you will work primarily with a control platform with. But where I really want to focus on today is performance-led product for IP audio. And that for me is two things. It's Roon and Dante. So Roon is a software-based platform. It came from Sulus way back in the day, which was started in 2004, I want to say, or 2003, and Meridian actually acquired them in 2008. So personally, we have a lot of big background on this IP audio product with Sulus and now Roon. The wild thing about Roon is that being software, they can do a lot of really unique things. So they can talk to various languages across the network. So not only do they speak their own language, their protocol, which is called Roon Ready or Roon Rat, but then they can also speak to Meridian products, which is its own language. They can speak to Sonos, they can speak to Chromecast, AirPlay, or even USB devices. So it's a pretty or very flexible solution for deployment. It's high quality. So we can stream up to 24-bit, 352K sample rates. So for us audio guys, we get super excited about that. It does support MQA, which is a high-res streaming standard. So again, very excited about that. They have software-based DSP inside of Roon. So again, you can make adjustments and tweak rooms. We talked about their own protocol. So what Roon has done that's very unique is they understand that hardware manufacturers in the performance audio space aren't necessarily network audio engineers. So they develop their own language and then they offer it to license to manufacturers. So Meridian, we license, and we can take that language, embed it in a product. And when it plugs onto a network with a Roon server, wham, automatically they see each other and they work right away. It's literally just a quick, hello, I'm here, enable. And the other benefit of that is we get a layer of communication beyond just the audio, but we get a control layer as well. So products can be turned on and off and volume adjusted all from the interface. So very, very similar to Sonos, but it's stepped up in terms of performance. The thing to understand and where it can get messy is that even though Roon supports all of these different languages, they're not all compatible with each other. So this is a big gotcha that I've had over the years deploying this, where I've had guys want to sell a Meridian endpoint that's Roon, that is a Roon endpoint, but it is not compatible with a Sonos speaker to sync or to basically to play the same song at the same time across the network. That doesn't work. So it's really important to understand.
Does it have to dumb down to the lowest common denominator, if you will?
It's not even possible, Mark.
Okay.
So in other words, you can't have a Sonos Play 5 link with a Meridian 218. It is not possible. Doesn't happen. So what's important here is if you want to use Roon for distributed audio, give us a shout. We're happy to help you just do a quick little, overview of what you're trying to accomplish to make sure that you're choosing the right hardware for success. The other thing to know about Roon is that in digital audio, there's a device that sets the clock, sets the pace of the audio, if that makes sense. And in Roon, all the endpoints, the physical players, have their own clock. This can become challenging. Roon works very hard to unify what's called network latency. So this is how quickly things start and stop. But the challenge is sometimes that audio can drift. So if you have adjacent rooms with two different players and you have a very long song, you may find that there may be a delay or an echo very slightly. The clocking gets resynced at the beginning of each song. Again, if you stick with all one language, Roon language or Roon Ready language, that is very rare to have happen. The other benefit of using a Roon Ready product is that you can have different hardware across manufacturers. So you can have a Meridian Roon Ready product with a Bowers and Wilkins Roon Ready product or a Lingdorf Roon Ready product. Very slick. So for you as an integrator, you have greater flexibility at choosing what products go into a home or a job. So it's an amazing platform. If you haven't used it, I suggest you take a look. I do not sell it directly, but we use it on a regular because our hardware supports it. And just a few examples of Roon Ready hardware here. So Meridian 218. And the other reason I like this application for IP audio is that a lot of the hardware is also double duty. It's not just a streamer, but they do other things. So something like the Lingdorf MP60, that's a brilliant surround processor. It's a Roon Ready device, but obviously then it's a regular surround decoder as well, 16 channels. So it can do more than one thing. The small box on the top is the Meridian 218. That is a mini digital preamp with Roon streaming. So 5 inputs with Roon streaming, with IP control. So tremendous power when you talk about distributed audio applications. So now the big one, the one that most people want to learn about is Dante. So what the heck is Dante? Dante is essentially, and I call it personally, a semi-closed loop system. But what they've done very smartly is combine software, hardware, and protocol all under one roof. So it's from a company called Audinate out of Australia. And essentially, it's very similar to how Roon does their Roon RAT solution. A manufacturer like Meridian, for example, could license a Dante chip and embed it in their product. And when they do that, and that product is plugged onto the network, they all see each other. It's amazing how easy it is. And what's powerful about Dante is it is infinitely scalable. The network is your backbone. They have support from hundreds of manufacturers. I mean, the list is amazing. I remember my first trip to ISE in Europe and went by their booth, and you see every manufacturer on this giant wall, and it just blew my mind that, why is this not getting into residential? So where Dante has been very successful is in commercial, because it's easy for large scale deployments. It's not necessarily easy for deploying. So this is where Resi's probably been a little more reluctant, but also there hasn't been the right hardware for residential until very recently. So now I'm starting to see a lot of interest. So personally, I'm very invested in this. I think this is going to be a technology that we'll see and use on the regular. Crestron has announced products with Dante embedded now, so we'll see a lot more adoption there. But there are a lot of other wins here. So Dante does support higher sample rates, 24-bit up to 192K. Just a quick sidebar on that. You only select one sample rate for your entire system. So being a quick audio guy, I like the Roon solution because it can switch sample rates depending on its quality level or room, where Dante, everything runs at one sample rate regardless. They do this for reliability, scalability. There is one single master clock in Dante. So it will choose, or you can specify what you want to be the master clock. But where it gets very exciting is all of the virtual DSP. So that means software-driven DSP rather than a hard, basically it's done in a device or a playback device. It's done virtually, and I'll show you that in just a minute. There is some support, depending on product, with AES-67. So again, just another open protocol for streaming audio on the network, but very reliable, full control integration. And another big benefit is less rack space. So you can achieve way more in less. And we'll show you some examples here. So I basically, to keep it very simple, personally, I find it easy to understand. You look at 3 layers of Dante. You have your break-in interfaces, we have virtual DSP, and then we have breakout devices. So the break-in is basically getting audio onto the network. That is a break-in. And this can come in a variety of forms and sizes and boxes, but it's basically getting analog, digital audio, HDMI audio onto the network. Virtual DSP, again, that's your bucket in the middle. So it takes everything coming in, put it in a bucket, and it will do channel routing, mapping, EQ, crazy amounts of power, and then do all the routing out to wherever you want on the network. So that image in the bottom right-hand corner is a screenshot of Dante controller. It's very simple. All the devices on the x-axis across the top, those are your transmitters. These are devices that will transmit audio onto the network. On the y-axis going down the left-hand side, these are all your devices that can receive audio. And you literally go on that little grid and you just check off where you want it to go. It
So
is
this
that
is
easy.
like in lieu of an audio matrix from years past.
Exactly right, Mark.
Gigantic, 32 channel audio matrices that we dealt with for years.
Yeah, right. Remember those, like all the analog audio cables in? And no, that's a perfect analogy. That's exactly what that is. That is a virtual digital audio matrix right there.
And now we're just handling it in software.
That's exactly right. So it makes our lives a lot easier.
Right.
And then we have breakout devices. So breakout devices can be analog out, digital out, but where it gets very exciting is when the breakout device is an actual speaker or an amplifier, which is pretty wild. So I just want to show some examples of break-in interfaces. And the reason I've personally chosen to get into this space is because we've started working with a company out of Switzerland called NextGenTech. And NextGenTech has been very popular in the marine space over the past 5 years because they have created interfaces specifically for residential / marine applications. So obviously Audinate makes their own break-in, breakout, or break-in cables, sorry. So you can see very simple RCA to network adapter down to the bottom here. But where it gets pretty wild is with these NextGenTech boxes where we have things like the TVI. And the TVI is a very small device that is literally a coax and an optical input and then network out. That's it. It's a PoE powered device. So the way to think about this is anywhere you have a network jack, you can inject audio. This is primarily used to sit directly behind a television. So if you mounted a TV on the wall, customers want to use their embedded apps, or even if you're coming in from a distributed video system like Crestron DM, you can come in from DM and then take optical out of the TV into the TVI and then injects that audio onto the network. And again, thinking about it a different way, that TV now isn't restricted to one location. That audio can go anywhere in the home. So it's very, very powerful. The next interface is called the BTI. This is a Bluetooth interface, very popular. We get a lot of interest in this because, and there are other Bluetooth to Dante devices, but this is a PoE device and it's simple pair with Crestron or control capability. So the concept is you can walk into a home, think an estate, guest room, a guest can walk in, will immediately see, guest room, whatever numbered on their phone as a Bluetooth device. They tap it to pair on their phone. That's it. It immediately pairs. It supports all the high quality codecs. And then the volume control on their phone becomes the volume control for the room. So that pairing, that handoff is done in the virtual DSP. So from volume control in the DSP to volume control on your phone, all done on the fly. Transport controls, feedback, everything is available to the automation system as well. So you can have it fully integrated on Crestron. The BTI can also be configured, not to jump ahead, but as a breakout device to transmit to wireless headphones. That has been a very, very, very big problem solver because a lot of times customers, they have master bedroom situation where, husband wants to stay up and watch TV, it seems, and he wants wireless headphones. This is a perfect solution because you can do all the down mix for surround, everything in virtual DSP. The MCP 4K here, I know I'm just showing you a bunch of HDMI inputs, but this one box is our most popular interface because this enables us to get consumer-led HDMI sources into the network, 4 HDMI in, and then decode on board, which is the big differentiator because there are other HDMI to Dante devices, but they don't have a decoder. So this will decode Dolby True HD, DTSMA, Dolby Digital Plus, on and on and on. Everything but Atmos because it's a 8-channel box. So HDMI in, and then 8 channels get dumped on the network. That's it. And again, when you start thinking about virtual DSP, we can take those 8 channels, we can route them to the media room for full surround, but then we can also down mix those 8 channels to 2-channel and then pump that to the rest of the house. So from marine application, this is very popular to have one of these in a master stateroom and then do the down mix for the lab, for the galley. And just another interface, the last one, not yet released, but a very unique product that has an 8-channel box, but 4 2-channel inputs. So this can be used with Sonos ports, Apple TVs, Chromecasts, you name it, just a condensed version. So one Ethernet connection and well, two, but one Ethernet connection and then 8 channels of audio onto the network. What's important to know is a lot of these devices do require 2 Ethernet connections. One is for the control layer and the other is for PoE, but then also the audio layer. So all Dante is going to be run on a layer 3 switch. So you need a proper network and you need proper network engineers. This is not a real plug and play solution from a networking perspective, but any serious network engineer is going to know what they're doing. It's all standard stuff. And obviously we do a lot of work with the folks at Access Networks, so they help a lot of our dealers deploy these. Jumping to DSP now, our bucket in the middle, it's all virtual. The important thing to know about DSP, there's a variety of manufacturers. We choose to work with Symmetrix and NST Audio, but what Symmetrix gives us is an amazing backbone. There's a wide range of Symmetrix programmers available. If somebody isn't, if a dealer doesn't have that expertise on staff, we can easily help with that. Next Gen Tech themselves do the programming directly. But the DSP is powerful because it's headless, sits in the rack, and there's a variety of shapes and sizes depending on local break or local inputs or outputs required in a rack-based solution. So you can do a full 16 by 16 in and out if you want to feed traditional amplifiers, or you want to feed outdoor, amplifiers for larger outdoor-based systems, or you just want to get audio in to the DSP and bypass the network. That's also a good solution. So there's definitely some engineering when it comes to this that needs to be done. At Apex, we help all of our integrators do this. So we look at a home and help them design a system turnkey. But the key with DSP is to know the number of playback zones, which is what dictates the amount of horsepower that's needed. So a good rule of thumb is usually 3 surround zones or 10 stereo zones is equal to 1 DSP. And so if you have more, you keep going up and up and up. And then lastly, breakout, playback, right? This is usually what we think about the most because this is what we experience, right, with our ears. But breakout devices are pretty wild because this can give us a lot of flexibility in the Dante world. The most popular are amplifiers with Dante embedded. I love this because if you see on the bottom left-hand corner here, this is an amplifier. It's 2U of rack space, but it's 32 channels of amplification in 2U. So it's amazing what we can accomplish when we don't have all of this analog input connectivity. So it's literally just the 2 Ethernet ins. This is not a PoE powered device. This obviously plugs in for normal mains power, but it gives us 140 watts by 32. So very popular amplifier from Next Gen Tech. So you can fit a tremendous amount of playback in a small amount of rack space. You can also think about not everything has to be in one area of a home either, right? So you could have 2 rack rooms on opposite sides of an estate and have multiple amplifiers, and then the backbone is your network rather than any type of traditional analog infrastructure. So very nice solution. There are also a handful of amplifiers from this company called Stewart Audio. They make these tiny little PoE powered Dante amplifiers. Pretty wild. So in an area where you may just have a network connectivity, we can inject, obviously it needs PoE, but we can get audio playback in a room. Obviously not tons of power, 8 watts. So it's not going to drive big speakers or anything, but it's enough, to get proper background music in most applications. Very popular in Marine because you can put this in cabins or staterooms or something, or obviously smaller spaces where you don't need that amount of power. And then there are even loudspeakers. So this is a speaker. I stole that image from MSC Audio. So they make Dante loudspeakers. It needs 24 volts of power, but it is a Dante-driven loudspeaker. So there's no amps in the rack. That's a pretty popular solution in commercial because you're just dropping cat. With Meridian Audio, we've done this for years with powered loudspeakers. So Meridian is looking at doing Dante to its language speaker link. So then we can keep the amps out of the rack and then just use the network as the backbone. So very popular solution, but it genuinely all does come down to application. The last breakout I'll tell you about is in the top right. And that's a very unique product because that's a DSP from a company we work with called TPI. And this is a 16 channel Dante in to 16 channel balanced analog out DSP. The reason I bring this up is because we can use Dante for ultra high performance theater playback. So there are a lot of surround processors on the market, like the Lingdorf MP60 that supports AES 67, or the Dolby Professional product like the Dolby CP850 that supports AES output that can go into this, speak Dante, move digital audio properly into the box at 48K, and then all the DSP for the theater is done in one box. That is a brilliant architecture. It keeps the DSP out of the amps for the theater, which is a very good thing. Really ups the performance for these reference cinemas. So lots of applications. So just want to show some of this to inspire you and show you what's possible. And that's it. That's all I had for you. So hopefully we did it in a little over 20 minutes. I'm sorry, Mark, but hopefully it was enough time and enough of a crash course.
I know that was fast and quick, you guys. Ryan's always around to take questions. I'm always around to answer questions, get with you guys. I know Ryan said he's not a network engineer. Many of you know that I was a network engineer for many years. So, and I'm Dante certified. I have been for years. I think this stuff is brilliant, especially when we're looking at really large houses for Dante.
Yes.
Allows us to distribute some of that audio around the house without having just one gigantic mechanical AV room. We can actually now distribute this a little bit, take off some of that load, take away some of those 300-foot speaker runs that make no sense at all to an audio.
We just did this actually in a project up in Los Altos Hills, Portola Valley, where we had done the house a long time ago, or over 2 years ago, but we were doing a outdoor theater and we used Dante to bring some channels outside.
Yep.
That's why I wanted John Campanella on this. If I could have a copy of this, I would forward it to him.
Sure.
And because he's essentially going to be my residential designer. So I'd love to at least have him be exposed to this.
And one thing that I can send you to that's pretty popular. We do a lot of work in marine. So this is a big part of the business, and this is where it came from. This is where Next Gen Tech came from, was the super yacht world, because obviously in that space there's no rack space, right? Zero. And then they're also very concerned, weirdly enough, about carbon footprint of all things. Seriously, no, that's a thing. Electricity being drawn, but also
electricity. I get it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's
efficiency.
Because no, if there's a lot of stuff running on the boat, that burns more diesel, right? So that's a big deal, because obviously it's really expensive, right? So efficiency is key at sea. Like that is number one. Less runs too, because the wiring is very complex and expensive for marine. So this is an interesting example from Next Gen, because it just shows all the orange dots are speakers, and it shows you how easy deployment can be, especially when you think about translating this to Resi, because this whole boat runs on essentially 4 SKUs. That's it. Right, so 2 types of amplifier, or 3 types of amplifier, sorry. Then the surround processor, the MCP4K. So that's actually very popular for this area here, because what we can do is we actually have 2 different surround zones, and then a future automation arm that swings the TV around 180 degrees between the 2 locations. And then in the DSP, we can swap the channel count. I know that's always been a big thing in residential, right? People are like, oh, how can I move from my seating position being this way to then orientate this way? And you look at these very complex surround decoders, we can do this in the symmetrics in a snap. It's a breeze. So very easy solution here. And then as you go down a deck, you can see same story, PoE powered amplifiers, or the areas that are critical run off the big amps in the rack, and then more the MCP surround controllers and BTI devices. So very simple example, and you can see how little equipment this whole ship requires.
How'd you guys get the blueprints of my new boat?
Listen, I wasn't going to tell anybody. Okay.
Incredible.
I guess AVD.
This is a little one too. So that's what I have for you guys.
Yeah, can you get me a copy of that, Mark?